Eternal Champions is gonna eat your old fighting games for lunch. No wonder it has 9 huge warriors, 3 training modes, and over 315 martial arts moves. Bon appetit. Eternal Champions, only on Sega Genesis.
The Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis boasted some of the best games of any generation, but it was during the 16-bit era that fighting games made their way onto home consoles and exploded with popularity, and there were 2 that dominated the gaming landscape: Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat. Following those 2 giants, it seemed that every company and their best friend started releasing fighting games for home consoles. For me, as much as I played Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat everywhere and anywhere as a kid, there was another fighting game that I sunk plenty of hours into, and to this day, I'm not really sure why. Eternal Champions was a Genesis exclusive, developed and published by Sega themselves. Now, I never owned the game myself, but one of my best friends across the street did, so my brother and I would spend a lot of time over there playing this unique fighting game. Truth of the matter is, though, once we had a few fights in Eternal Champions, we'd often end up bored and eventually throw in Mortal Kombat. It's not that Eternal Champions didn't try. In fact, there's more here than you're likely to find in most fighting games. The story has a quasi-Mortal Kombat vibe to it, but the premise is that some all-powerful being decides that the only way to save humanity is to circle through time and bring together the fiercest fighters the world has ever known over its lifetime, i.e., the champion fighter of all eternity. There's a story of stealing souls, using them to balance life in the world. They really try and go the extra mile here. And like any fighting game, it has a unique cast of characters, with Eternal Champions boasting said cast of fighters from all points in time. There's cyborgs, and warlocks, and prehistoric warriors, and, well, you get the idea. Now, in addition to some nice character designs to accompany the plot, Eternal Champions really goes that extra mile to provide some background on each fighter. The characters all have lengthy biographies and backstories that you can scroll through in the menus. I always admired that, despite not having the patience when I was younger to take the time to read and really understand the characters. The difference back then was that Street Fighter II and Mortal Kombat were everywhere. The lore of both games was simple and easy with a little backstory, but that's it. The games were all about the action, and that's the biggest difference between these 2 games and Eternal Champions. The former were about the gameplay. The latter, well, you needed that extra meat on the bone because the rest of it... That's not to say that Eternal Champions didn't try hard to add depth and uniqueness to its presentation. There are additional training modes and a few other bells and whistles, but none of that amounts to a hill of beans, really. When you navigate into the game itself, you're left wanting. For one, if you don't have a 6-button Genesis controller, then this game gets a little more tricky. With a standard 3-button controller, you don't have enough options for punch and kick attacks, so in order to switch between fists and feet, you need to press Start on the controller, and then you'll notice your little yin-yang will move up or down. Depending on which position it's in will tell you whether you're punching or kicking. Aside from that, it's a fighting game. Despite the unique characters, deep backstory, and exclusivity, Eternal Champions is just kind of there. There's enough that it should be more than it is, but it isn't. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but play it for yourself and you'll know exactly what I mean. It's like so many fighting games that debuted during the 16-bit generation. A lot of options, a lot of different ideas to try to make them different from the rest, but at the end of it all, you'd rather just play Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat. And that's exactly where Eternal Champions fits in. But it was a lot of time spent with some good friends growing up, and for that reason, Eternal Champions will always mean just a little bit extra to me.
So you pretty much know what to expect from Eternal Champions, huh? Well, maybe not. You see, it has these 9 huge warriors. And they've got more ways than ever to kick your butt. You may never look at other fighting games the same way.
Eternal Champions, only on Sega Genesis.
Whoa.